What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of Debate DC. I got my guy Ryan here, and Ryan sent in his message on Vover, and he said to me, "Hey, DC, what do you think about the allegations that lately you have shown bias in your commentary?" Now, Ryan, I've seen this, and I've never had the opportunity to talk to anyone about it. So it was great to see that you had that view. And I kind of wanted to know what you thought about it and what your thoughts are in regards to that subject.
For sure. First of all, thank you so much for the opportunity, man. I'm a huge fan of you, DC. I've been watching you fight for years, man. Like, I remember in high school watching your fight against Gustafsson. Like, everyone in my school was talking about your Gus fight for the whole day. Like, it was absolute madness. So, like, thank you for all the amazing entertainment you've given me, just first and foremost. And then, yeah, so what I think about the commentary bias and stuff like that, I think, first of all, it's really easy. I mean, I'm a big boxing fan. I've been watching boxing for like over 10 years. It's really easy to be caught up in something that some guy is doing. And I think that's the thing that I've always told myself, like, well, you know, if one guy sees one thing more than another, then, you know, you can't really fault him for it. But I wanted to talk to you about a couple of instances in particular, and I wanted to get your thoughts and also know if you rewatched the fights, if you like thought that your commentary was still accurate even after the fact. So I think the first one that kind of made me think like recently was Jan Blachowicz versus Israel Adesanya. And I think that fight, it was a close striking match. It was like a like kickboxing chess basically. But it was one that I think a lot of people felt that Jan pretty clearly was able to outstrike Izzy. I thought he won it 3-2 decisively. Maybe you could argue 4-1. Izzy obviously had some great moments. But I felt that a lot of the commentary in that fight kind of was focusing a lot on Izzy's feints. So I was wondering,
Yep.
I was wondering like, so what was the mindset there? So when you're sitting ringside and you're seeing like these guys go at it, is it just that like you see a guy do one thing, like Izzy start fainting, and then you start to kind of get fixated on that? Or is it that there was a lot of what Jan was doing subtle? What do you think?
So here's the thing, right? Like, I think, and this is where I think people get caught up.
Yeah.
In the fight with Adesanya and Blachowicz, I gave credit to Blachowicz. I kind of gave Blachowicz rounds early in the fight too. And I thought he ran away with the fight or took the fight clearly as the fight went longer. But here's my issue. When people talk about you're fixated on the feints, we're not talking about a fight where one guy was clearly landing a ton of stuff, and then the other guy just wasn't doing much. We had two guys not doing much at all. It's not like Jan Blachowicz just blew the doors off of this fight with activity and with landing. So we had one guy popping feints, doing things to set up attacks, but he never capitalized on it. That is what I was watching in regards to that fight. I thought Blachowicz won the fight. Even in those very close exchanges early, I thought Blachowicz won the fight. But we can't sit here and pretend that we're watching a fight where one guy is just landing 4-1, 5-1, 6-1. It was very competitive all the way through, and it was very low activity. So whereas Izzy wasn't throwing and landing off of those feints, Jan wasn't doing much either. I think leg kicks really did lead Jan to win that fight, and Jan and I are in a great place now. He was even mad after the fight. But the reality is, it wasn't like either guy was throwing so much, and it was so clear who was winning the fight. And that's why you get scorecards that are all over the place. 48-47, 48-47, 49-46, because people are watching different fights.
Yeah.
No, but that's the thing though, right? But it's like people, and you sound like a guy that's educated in the sport and that understands it. But there are people that legitimately just follow. They follow a idea. They legitimately follow I'm sorry. Like if there's what's the word I'm looking for? If there's a rhetoric going out there, if there's something going around, people just jump on that. Yeah. Like people just jump on that. Like there are a number of things over the course of time where it is just completely misunderstood. And then as fans, you follow that path without really knowing what the difference is. There are people that watched that fight that would have agreed what I saw, what Rogan may have seen. But because the majority says something, they just kind of fall in line. And I think that's where the issue lies. Because now I'm getting, and we'll get to your next fight, but now I'm getting stuff like, Daniel, you were very biased to Islam. How could I be biased to Islam? What could I have possibly said positive about Dan Hooker in that fight? There is no bias whenever the fight is clearly on one side. So it's that's where it becomes a bit much for me. And that's why that's when you start to understand and realize why the people from the outside, their opinions don't matter as much, because they make those types of claims.
Right. And I mean, that's the other thing too, is what I acknowledge is that, like, what other commentator other than like you and Bisbing are even going to bring that much experience to the table? Like, you guys probably are seeing things.
Rogan, that's the thing about Rogan though, man. People misunderstand what Joe brings to this thing. Joe has seen this thing from day one. He has a vast knowledge of sport. I think that's one of the biggest mistakes people make in mixed martial arts, is that if you haven't done it, you can't be well, guess what? Most of you haven't done it yourself, but you want your opinion to matter. It's like Joe Rogan has been there since day one. He understands the game. So it's not that. I think experience is just one part of calling a fight.
Sure.
But he's so knowledgeable. Dominic Cruz is so knowledgeable. Paul Felder is so knowledgeable. I think right now the UFC has a stable of commentators and play-by-play analysts that are second to none in sport. I'm talking all sport, and it's just going to continue to get better.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's that second fight you have for me?
No, I wanted to talk about Rob Whittaker versus Jared Cannonier. So that was one that I was watching live, and I felt that was like, it was competitive, but to me, once Jared broke his arm, his activity really kind of dropped off after the first round, like off blocking that head kick. And then to me, it was like a pretty clear 2-1 Rob. And then he kind of finished the fight with an exclamation point. And I felt that, like, the general, like, I don't know. I think you said something at the end of the fight, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe I remember hearing you say, like, oh, well, it's a close fight. I don't know which way it could go. And then I remember thinking, like, well, was that not a decisive victory for Rob Whittaker? And if not, then, like, what did I miss, you know?
So that's the thing, right? I say that at times, and at times I'll say that was a close fight. But the reality is, the other day I almost called Jorge Masvidal Kamaru Usman one close and had to correct myself on NFL Live. So it's like you're speaking, and again, you're speaking for 7 hours on 26 different fighters. I'm going through a tunnel right now. Apologize. But like I'm going for 26 hours. I'm going for 7 hours on 26 different fighters. It's not easy.
Right.
We got notes in front of us. We were talking about these guys. But when I watched the Robert Whittaker fight, it was clear Rob Whittaker won the fight. But I'm almost speaking to Jared Cannonier, having a good accounting of himself, because he showed in that fight how championship level he is. But Robert just showed how elite he is. I think the reality is the people whose opinions matter are the ones that are in these positions to do these jobs. And that's why we call the fight in the way we do. Because there are a lot of things that people miss, man. When fighters come together, if it's not something big that's happening, you miss those short little right hands when the fighters come together. Or you miss the little jab as they come in close, a little short check hook. Yeah. People, the blind eye sees the big action. The trained eye sees the little detail within those actions that you may be scoring, but even the judges may not be scoring.
Right.
Now, I've been on the wrong side before. And trust me, we get told that in the ear, like, I don't know, man. I don't really agree with you guys. I think you guys are on the wrong side of the commentary.
Right.
They will tell us. You know, I think one fight that stands out to me was one time Montana De La Rosa was fighting someone. And I was almost crediting her to a fault, when in reality she was losing. But there are other times where in the Volkanovski-Ortega fight, you start to talk about Ortega surviving, and it almost speaks to his toughness. But the reality is, when Brian Ortega's toughness becomes the story, that tells you how well Alexander Volkanovski's fighting.
Right.
I think that you got to really understand the job to speak to the narrative, to the ebbs and the flow of the fight. And I believe that for how dominant Volkanovski was, it became about, wow, how tough is Brian Ortega to still be out there lasting and doing what he's doing.
Yeah.
But ultimately, you give the champion his roses for putting on such a great performance.
100%. And I can see now what you're saying too about like when you were talking about the fight between Rob and Jared being close. I mean, you're almost like putting respect on Jared for just being so tough and sticking in the fight, even though you could clearly, bro, you could see his arm was broken after the first round. That was ridiculous, man. I mean, he just like he acted like nothing was wrong. He just didn't throw the hand. I was like, holy shit.
These fighters, these men and women, are different.
Yeah,
they are not like everyone else, and that's why they can go through the things that they go through. But Ryan, we're all watching different fights. We're just sitting in front of millions of people with a headset on, tasked with telling you what's going on in the fight. If you don't agree, you have your own eyes. But ultimately, if we watch 100 fights together, most of those fights, you're going to see it in the same way that I do, or what that Joe Rogan does, or that John Anik does, or you're going to watch the wrong fight. But I mean, when you got judges' scorecards all over the place like we've been seeing, obviously, things are not universal in mixed martial arts. So I don't mind addressing this whole bias thing. I think it's absurd. I don't agree at all, Ryan. I think it's absurd. And if you ask me if I'm biased towards Islam Makhachev or Khabib Nurmagomedov, guys, I have called Khabib's fights, Luke Rockhold, Deron Wynn, Islam Makhachev. I've called all of their fights, and I feel like I have done their opponents justice. I go out of my way to make sure that we do their opponents justice. I'm a professional. And for as much as I love my teammates, I understand the difference and how to separate myself from them. But Ryan, you came in here, you had good points. You had good points. You had your research in order. But then midway through it, you do just like everybody else, you start agreeing. So it's like, how am I debating with everybody just agree? You just agree with what I'm saying. Ryan.
Hey man, listen, I believe what I said and I believe what I felt in the moment. But I mean, like talking to you now, I'm understanding a little bit better what the context is, and I'm putting myself in your shoes. So I'm reluctantly agreeing, but I absolutely do agree. And I love the job that you do too. So stop being so likable, DC.
Ryan, that's the problem. See, that's why I keep winning these debates. Ryan, I'm literally 5-0. I'm 5-0, Ryan. I'm literally 5-0 because midway through the deal, everybody just agrees. And ultimately, that's what makes me the champ. So thank you, my man, Ryan. I appreciate it. I appreciate you jumping on. Look, man, if you're not getting critiqued, then you aren't doing a great job. And I appreciate the time that you waited for me. I appreciate you coming out here with a very educated point and with your research done. Man, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Man, thank you for the commentator work, the fighter work you've done. You're a legend of this sport, and this is a life highlight for me. So thank you, DC. Thank you so much.
You're the man. Everybody, thank you so much for joining this episode of Debate DC. Find it everywhere you get your podcast. Download the Vover app. Submit those questions. Maybe it'll be you next week